I think the 2026 elections already we are behind the 8 ball as far as the electoral process. I think if you add in high gas prices, high oil prices, and if we are still bombing Iran with kinetic action, people don't want to call it war, but if there's still kinetic action that causes oil to be over $100, I think you're going to see a disastrous election.
Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky with that warning for his party ahead of November. The focus right now is on Iran, but the Trump administration seems to also be setting the stage for regime change in Cuba. MS Now reporter Britt Miller has that part of the story.
As the U.S.-Israel war with Iran rages in the Middle East, President Trump is setting his sights on another target, Cuba.
It may be a friendly takeover. It may not be a friendly takeover. It wouldn't matter because they're down to, as they say, fumes.
Like operations in Iran and Venezuela, Trump is pushing for regime change through a possible deal with the Cuban government. But policy experts are questioning why now.
And they're actually not even identifying some threat that they're trying to eliminate. There's no nuclear weapons in Cuba or missiles. It just seems to be settling a very old score for the United States.
After Fidel Castro's revolution, Cuba's relations with the Soviet Union grew stronger, stoking U.S. fear while on the brink of nuclear war. Generations were torn apart under Castro's rule as families escaped to the U.S. President Obama later easing travel restrictions to Cuba and removing the country from the state sponsors of terrorism list. But nearly 70 years later, the Castro family still exerting power even after Fidel Castro's death. Today, Cubans are suffering with high inflation, food shortages, power outages, and a worsening energy crisis after the U.S. captured ousted Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and cut off Cuba's access to Venezuela's oil.
Well, like everybody else here in Miami and on the island, everyone is very, very excited. Cubans are going through the difficulties that they're going through. So the fact that now there is a horizon makes people hopeful that the pain is going to be short-lived, is going to be temporary, and it's going to lead to something much, much better.
But not all Cuban Americans are hopeful a regime change will mean better days ahead.
We haven't seen him do anything else for Venezuela. He's dropped it. Now it's Iran and now it's Cuba. So it's like a little boy that has a new toy.
However, the Trump administration is making it clear this is no game as the DOJ aims for criminal charges against Cuban leaders.
Well, the criminal charges is something that this community has been asking for the last 30 years.
As Trump continues to tighten his grip on Cuba, his approach to foreign policy is being scrutinized.
Was the Venezuelan operation legal? No. Was the Iran war legal? No. Is there any kind of legal basis to be strangling an island with sanctions and kind of demanding that the government change itself? No. And so I think what people around the world see is the United States that is no longer in any way bound by international law.
And while the president's move for regime change in Cuba appears to be diplomatic for now, his talk of removing the Castros from power echoes a long U.S. history of trying to reshape Cuba, including the CIA effort to overthrow Fidel Castro during the disastrous Bay of Pigs invasion in 1961. Back to you.
And as the war in Iran continues, there is talk about Cuba being next. And I'm curious, given that this was definitely not Donald Trump's campaign promise to the base, to be going to Venezuela, trying to get Greenland, or perhaps now Cuba and Iran. And Rufus, I'm wondering about European allies and how they are looking at their relationship with the United States of America, or maybe better, the word is planning, how they play it.
Well, Mika, the way I think about this, because I think it's a heartbreaking chapter in U.S.-European relations. And remember, this is a bloc of countries that has stood in lockstep with the United States on virtually every global issue since the end of World War II. And if you even just look, and I'm no fan of the Iraq War, but you look at what George W. Bush did with our European allies in advance of that of that war, it was about bringing people in and getting them bought in. What I think you're seeing now is just reaction, and that they are being looped in kind of by default. They have to be. I mean, their interests as it relates to Iran are being targeted in some instances, so they have to respond. But there's such a lack of respect that exists right now between the Trump administration and our European allies. And that goes back to my favorite word in the English language, which is trust. That these relationships are built on this idea of trust, and it matters so much. And I think really...
Did they have it?
Well, that's the thing. I think the most damaging thing about the Trump administration's foreign policy to date is this erosion of trust. And that's the thing. That's the human thing, right? That's the thing that's going to take a new administration years to build back.
Right.
And we've benefited so much from that mutual trust. And I think this is true with all of the instances that you've mentioned, whether it's Iran or Greenland or Cuba or others. Yeah.
You know, my favorite word in the English language.
What is it?
Much like yours, chocolate. Yeah, you right? Yeah. Can you think of a better one?
That's pretty strong.
That's
the president likes tariffs. He says that's his
favorite word. There
that
you go.
was a promise.
Baseball. There you go. To each their own. So, Ed Luz, the question is, Angela Merkel during Donald Trump's first term talked about, hey, we need to stop depending on the United States. We have to take care of ourselves. We're hearing it again now. The question is, are the Europeans able to take care of themselves militarily? Are they going to be able to bring all of those interests together and figure out a way where they create their own defensive shield against the rest of the world?
Well, look, that's the aspiration. And I think the Greenland moment really crystallized that aspiration, even amongst the doubters a few weeks ago. And Iran, I mean, the fact that, this war... huge war, where Europe gets it in the groin much more directly than the United States. It's in the neighborhood. It's more dependent on liquefied natural gas, for example, that's been shut off from the Gulf. It's more liable to stray missiles. It's just within the neighborhood. The fact that Europe wasn't consulted about this war, and that it's in the line of fire, and that President Trump keeps berating Europe, particularly Britain, by the way, for not doing more to help the United States in this war. I think this just further sort of solidifies public opinion. And by the way, I mentioned Britain just now. Keir Starmer's government's stance has been strongly attacked here. Barely a day goes by where the administration does not berate Britain for being a former ally, for being an ally that used to step up but now doesn't step up. Keir Starmer's stance of initially denying RAF bases and Diego Garcia to American bombers has pushed him up 7 percentage points in the polls. And this is a guy who never goes up in the polls. I mean, he's...
does it.
And so I think, to borrow from your phraseology, Joe, my favorite French word, bullshit. I think that's European. That's the European sort of view of the Trump administration's foreign policy. It is doing extreme harm to the trust that remains in Europe for the United States. And the Europeans want the United States to be the United States. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Right. Speaking French, by the way, contagious.
It is.
One person starts speaking, everybody wants to.
You guys are going to be ripping cigarettes before we know it.
Go us, yeah.
By the way, we got a preview of Ed's upcoming book. Europe Gets It in the Groin.
Exactly.
It's going to be an extraordinary book. David Drucker, I want to turn to some of your new reporting here. The White House is using the war in Iran, apparently, to push supporters for political donations to Donald Trump and his allies. The Dispatch has found more than a half dozen fundraising messages that reference the war, like this post, which says Trump had no choice but to launch Operation Epic Fury and ask supporters if they will, quote, stand strong with him as he protects our country. So, David, walk us through some of your new reporting, the piece titled How Trump is Using Iran to Fund His Own Political War Chest.
Yeah, so the glamorous life of a political reporter is I'm on all these lists, right? And I get all of the Trump political operations email appeals. And, there's so much discussion. And I'm getting here, but just bear with me here. So much focus is on wealthy major donors who write big checks. But really, in this modern era, the mother's milk of political campaigns are these small donors, right? They give $10 to $25, maybe $100 a month, maybe $5 a month to campaigns and PACs and political operations. And that's how Trump has raised so much of that, almost $400 million that we've been talking about. And last week, the fundraisers started coming in with his latest initiative, which is the war in Iran, right? I mean, we get him for his economic initiatives, his energy initiatives, whatever, he's talking about at any given time. And they started rolling in with the war in Iran. And so that's what we are seeing. It's not the only thing he's raising money on. There's that Save America Act about voting that also is making its way into the series of email fundraising appeals. But we're getting a lot of these. And, Trump's hardly the first president to use military conflict or his foreign policy that involves projecting American power to bolster his political standing in some fashion. I mean, George W. Bush ran for re-election in part on the wars in Iran and Iraq and Afghanistan in 2004. But obviously, some people, because of the nature of how an email fundraising appeal is worded and how ephemeral it is, it can strike some people the wrong way. But it's just now it's a part of the fundraising agenda. And of course, the other thing I covered in this story, which I thought was interesting, were these meme videos being put out directly by the White House, not the political operation, that is splicing together scenes from the military conflict. They look like satellite shots of military strikes with video games, with scenes from professional football games, with big hits, home run hits in baseball games, rock music, things like that. And so it's a different sort of way to talk and communicate about a war.
It's
David
an
Drucker.
understatement. That is an understatement.
Thank you for your reporting this morning. And Ed Luce of the Financial Times, thank you. Former ambassador to Denmark, Rufus Gifford. Great to have you in studio with us.
And it was great to have you here. And Ed will be back. He's going to write that book.
Yeah.
But he has
What's this next piece for the FT?
No, the next piece is Groinomics.